Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to just give it 1 or 2 minutes. We have a couple of speakers that are going to be joining us that are still logging on. We thank you all for making it today. I'm going to go ahead and put a list of speaking list in the chat so everybody has folks' information in the congregations and organizations that they come from. Welcome, welcome. Okay. Welcome. Okay. All right. Well, some more people will filter in, and Cheryl, you've got the comms. My name is Brandon Fish. I am the director of our local Jewish Community Relations Council here in Charleston, but also I'm a proud steering committee member of Stamp Out Hate South Carolina. We are a coalition that was formed at the beginning of last year when a lot of different groups of people that have been targeted by hate in South Carolina came together and decided that the only way that we would make it so that South Carolina wasn't one of 3 states in the entire country without hate crime legislation is that we're going to gather together and collectively use our platform to advocate for hate crime legislation. It's our goal to build a statewide network, and we've been successful thus far in doing that. We have over 100 different kinds of organizations, faith communities, and businesses signed on to this cause to pass hate crime legislation in South Carolina. Yesterday, H3620, the bill that we are in support of and pushing for at this moment, was in subcommittee at the Judicial Constitutional Laws Subcommittee, and a lot of people, including myself and a couple of the people on the call, were able to give testimony to the House Subcommittee. But some of the folks that we heard from in opposition to the hate crime legislation, some of those voices seem to be coming from some faith groups and faith communities. So today we just wanted to give everybody here and also the media, but also all of the people that support hate crime legislation in our faith communities, and we know that there are a lot of them, the chance to talk about how their faith informs their support for this hate crime legislation, why they think that this bill should pass, and have a chance to share with you all their perspective on H3620 and hate crime legislation. For those of you in the media, you can find our website at www.stampouthate.sc. Organizations have been going on there to sign on to a position statement in support of hate crime legislation. We also have legislative contact tools for the general public to use to contact members of the Judiciary Committee and legislature in support of hate crime legislation. We are confident that in this legislative session, we will be able to pass a hate crime law in South Carolina and send a message to our citizens that they are protected from hate in South Carolina, and send a message to those who would perpetrate hate crimes that hate is not welcome here in our state. So with that, I would like to introduce really one of the national champions of this cause. They have been instrumental in the passage of hate crime legislation throughout the country. In the 47, they played a role in the 47 states that have hate crime legislation currently and have been a huge help to our local effort to get this done. We have with us Dr. Allison Padilla-Goodman, the Regional Vice President of the Anti-Defamation League. Allison, if you could just say a couple of words about the ADL's support for hate crime legislation, and maybe even, having just accomplished this feat in Georgia, if you could share with us the role that maybe a couple of faith communities in Georgia have played in this process. That'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Allison Padilla-Goodman. I'm the Vice President of the Southern Division of ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and I'm really excited to be here today with the Stamp Out Hate Coalition and leadership from across South Carolina to urge the South Carolina legislature to pass hate crime legislation H3620. We worked on this very ferociously in Georgia and had a really wonderful kind of unifying experience in our state, and we're ready. I think everybody is ready for South Carolina to not be one of the last 4 states in the entire nation that does not have a hate crimes law. We know that South Carolina is better than this, and it's time to show all of South Carolinians and the nation that we take people's identities seriously and we protect them. And then we're not going to allow bias and bigotry to reign free. And we believe that everyone should be who they are without fear of violence. It's time for South Carolina to send a message to hate crimes victims and all their residents that we stand with them and make sure that bias-motivated crimes are handled responsibly. ADL has a long history of fighting for justice and standing up to those who are victims of hatred and bigotry. We were founded in 1913, the same year that Leo Frank, the Jewish manager of a pencil factory in downtown Atlanta, after a heavily biased trial, was kidnapped from the state prison in Milledgeville, driven to Marietta, where he was lynched. And lynching and bias-motivated violence have a long, all too familiar history in our country, and one that we can all agree has no place in South Carolina's present or future. Hate crimes are different from ordinary criminal activity, and I know that people in South Carolina know this better than most. The effects of a hate crime are felt well beyond the immediate victim. They're felt by entire communities. When they're not adequately addressed, entire communities feel isolated and disenfranchised and unsafe and threatened. They're message crimes, and they're done intentionally to make entire communities feel unstable and scared. Like a cross burned on the front lawn of an African-American family's home, or a swastika drawn on the front door of a synagogue, a man attacked for wearing a turban. All of these crimes make members of those entire communities feel unsafe, and they can reverberate and have long-lasting impact if they're not addressed head-on. As we all know, hate crimes kind of continue to tear at the fabric of our society, and ignoring this by not having a hate crime law exacerbates the problem. We've had so many recent examples of just really mass hate crimes that have really torn at our social fabric. Even more concerning is that we see hate crimes getting more violent and deadlier, with last year's hate crimes data showing the deadliest year on record. South Carolina needs a hate crimes law because one hate crime is committed in this country every 90 minutes. South Carolina needs a hate crime law because hate crimes have an impact that lingers and extends beyond the specific victim. South Carolina needs a hate crimes law because hate crimes raise tensions that can divide and polarize communities. And while we cannot outlaw bias and bigotry, we can significantly improve how we respond to it. And I am eager to be a part of the solution in South Carolina and help stamp out hate with this coalition and help protect people's most precious identity, precious possession, their identities. So now is the time for South Carolina to pass a hate crimes legislation and join the 46 other states and the District of Columbia in putting this legislation on the book.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Goodman. Next, I just wanted to let you all know that Representative Wendell Gilliard has sent me a message encouraging us to continue a debate in the South Carolina House is running long. It is a busy time in the South Carolina House legislature, which is why we're on this call. to begin with. But and Reverend Manning is in the middle of some pastoral duties at the moment. But we do have with us Reverend Kylon Middleton. He is the pastor of Mount Zion AME Church, and he is one of our newest Charleston County councilmen, and he's been able to join us today, and we're thrilled to have him. Reverend Middleton, could you say a few words?
Thank you very much, and definitely to all of the panelists and everyone who's here. I am Kylon Middleton. I'm the pastor of Mount Zion AME Church, and definitely a member of Charleston County Council. But I don't come speaking in those roles today. I come speaking from a very personal perspective, because on June 17, 2015, my entire life changed. Our lives changed. The world watched as what happened here in Charleston, South Carolina, shifted, and literally paused the world stage when a white and avowed white supremacist filled with hate entered Mother Emanuel AME Church, an enduring symbol of justice, and murdered our loved ones. I lost a loved one in that particular tragedy in cold blood after being welcomed with love, taught the word of God, and prayed for by a group of faithful believers. As we mourned and continue to mourn, we learned that this act was not by accident. It was not random. This was a targeted act of hate. So today I lend my voice to support the hate crime legislation that is before the legislature at this time. It is absolutely compatible with my faith that love triumphs over hate, and that the passage of this legislation provides a component of justice to the families of victims of hate crimes and to those who are living survivors of the damaging, lingering effects of hate crimes. It is just. It is right for South Carolina to pass hate crime legislation so that we will not live under the umbrella of fear. We would not still contain individuals who live in the shadows of the lingering effects of those crimes, but they can become bold and emboldened and empowered to be whole back in their lives again, recognizing that particular event does not define the rest of their lives. I was so impacted from the time we started with jury selections during the trial series of the individual that murdered our loved ones, through the trial and the sentencing phases, to learn even through the manifesto that it was not by accident. These were targeted specific acts against certain groups of people, and it was listed. There was a clear, it may not have been clear to us during the time, but certainly as we read and we learned and we began to at least get in the psyche of the individual, we learned that these acts were targeted. And as a result, when looking at ways to remedy and to make whole and to cure victims and their families and those who continue to try to put the pieces of their lives back together, for us 6 years after the fact, and for others even the more. And we recognize that these particular acts don't stop because we continue lobbying for this type of legislation until we at least send a strong message that individuals who then perpetrate crimes based on hate and hatred and bigotry, well, certainly we can't legislate that, but certainly all of those go together, that they will be brought to justice. So thank you for the united momentum, hopefully, that will cause this legislation to pass. And we urge all of our legislators to vote yes for this particular bill, so that there can be, South Carolina can be among the states that enact hate crime legislation.
Thank you so much, Reverend Middleton. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Next, we have Reverend Regina H. Moore. She's the director of the Christian Action Council, which is of South Carolina, which is an organization representing a number of congregations working to make our society more just. Reverend Moore, are you here with us?
I'm here, and good afternoon. Regina Moore is my name, and I am honored to serve as the Executive Minister and CEO of the South Carolina Christian Action Council. This council represents 14 judicatories, over 3,800 churches across the state of South Carolina, which serve as faith communities to more than 1 million Christians in the state. Today, I stand to speak in support of hate crimes legislation. This work is long overdue. God is a God of love and not hate. When the prophet Isaiah observed that, quote, truth has stumbled in the streets and truth is nowhere to be found, he said God was appalled. At a time of rising reported racism, blatant hate, and the subsequent violence in this state, born of deep-rooted history, steeped in hostility, economic crises, and cultural shifts, now is the time for those who follow Jesus to speak. God expects us to stamp out hate. So we, the South Carolina Christian Action Council, feel compelled and called to raise a prophetic voice in the name of civility and social holiness. Our time under God is now. The mission of the South Carolina Christian Action Council is to promote and bear living witness to the unity of the body of Christ as we advocate for social justice, promote peacemaking, and foster racial and cultural justice, healing, and reconciliation. This legislation frames all of this work, so we must take action now. Thank you.
So powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Moore. Next, we have with us the CEO of my organization, and that is the Charleston Jewish Federation, Judi Corsaro. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name, as Brennan just said, is Judi Corsaro, and I have the honor of being the CEO of the Charleston Jewish Federation. I want to share why the organized Jewish community strongly supports the passage of a hate crime law. As descendants of immigrants who came to the United States to flee pogroms in the Holocaust, we know the consequences when society does not enshrine in law that the targeting of its minority citizens is unacceptable. We know that hate speech turns into acts of vandalism, then violence, and in the case of the Holocaust, genocide. According to the FBI 2019 hate crime statistics, of hate crimes motivated by hatred of a religious group, 60.2% targeted Jews. In 2020 and 2021, we witnessed white supremacists and neo-Nazis using social media platforms to disseminate propaganda and create fear and hatred, even spreading conspiracy theories blaming Jews for COVID-19. This dramatic escalation of anti-Semitism is having a serious impact on our Jewish community. Our local Holocaust survivors, having survived the most horrific manifestation of hate, are traumatized by what they see happening. Can you imagine how they feel when they see people on the news wearing Camp Auschwitz t-shirts or 6MWE? 6 million was not enough. Last year, our Holocaust memorial was vandalized with anti-Semitic graffiti, the first time in 25 years since it was built. Our children, and especially teens, are being harassed in school and on social media with anti-Semitic rhetoric, and in some cases, threats. Community members, not all community members, are feeling comfortable attending services at their synagogues for fear of a violent attack, or engaging in the many aspects of Jewish life, as they joyfully did just 5 years ago. It is so devastating to see how fear has seeped into our collective psyche. Our Jewish Federation is tasked with the responsibility for the safety, security, and well-being of our community members and institutions. And we're providing resources to bolster security infrastructure, and at the same time providing Holocaust education and awareness through the Remember program in our schools and community to share what happens when hate is left unchecked. The Jewish Community Relations Council of the Charleston Jewish Federation is proud to be playing an instrumental role in spearheading the coalition advocating for hate crime legislation through our Stamp Out Hate SC campaign. As a diverse coalition, we support one another and we stand together in our shared vision of creating a hate crime law, sending a message that there is no place for hate in South Carolina. Let us not be defined by being one of only 3 states in the country without a hate crime law. Please stand with us and join us now and help us move H3620 forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judi. We have with us Reverend John Black from Campbell Chapel AME Church in the Beaufort Hilton Head area, I believe. We really appreciate you being here with us. I think you're muted. There you go.
Thank you. I am John Black, the pastor of Campbell Chapel AME Church in Old Town Bluffton, South Carolina. I'm also one of the directors for the Low Country Coalition Against Hate. And today I'm just speaking as a citizen of South Carolina and a member of a faith community. My faith teaches me that I should be very concerned about the least among us. The least are most vulnerable and the least feel the impact of negativity in our society. The interesting thing today is any one of us can become the least among us. We live in a world where social media has given a voice to the most unusual and extreme opinions. And those opinions often form communities. And when those communities act outside of the law, there needs to be something in place to hold them accountable. They don't just target minorities anymore. They target all elements of our society. And we need legislation that will prevent their actions, legislation that will be a deterrent. And that's why I stand in support of H3620, because I want to be able to advocate for the least, who may be any one of us. Finally, I am a South Carolinian, and it bothers me that my state is often the last state to respond to a social call. Let's not be the 50th state. Let's act now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Black. We have next with us a member, a clergy from the Jewish community as well. Rabbi Jonathan Case from Beth Shalom Synagogue in Columbia is with us. Thank you, Rabbi Case, for joining us.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. I'm deeply concerned. I think we all are extraordinarily deeply concerned about the passage of this bill, which is so necessary and vital for the continuity of our people, of all of our people in South Carolina. Not Black, not Jewish, not Asian, but all of us. There's a virus rifling through South Carolina right now, and many of us are fighting for survival, to get an inoculation. We know that an inoculation will keep us safe from getting the coronavirus. Passing this bill is like an inoculation against hatred, an inoculation accepting the fact that we are responsible for one another. You know, it was Elie Wiesel who said, the only thing that makes evil capable of triumphing is silence of good people. When good people remain silent in the face of evil, that is when evil has the ability to be able to say and do what it wants to, without regard for the consequences. Hate is evil. And we as good people of South Carolina and across this nation are called upon to stand up and stand out and make our voices heard, not for one, but for all, unified as one people across this state and across this nation, that will not stand silently by as people are subject to hate, cruelty, and ultimately, as we heard, attacks and even death. I'm going to share with you something that you know very well. The beginning of the Bible is no accident when it speaks about two brothers, Cain and Abel. And Cain, in a fit of jealous anger, strikes down his brother and kills him, murders him. And what does Cain then do after God asks him, "Where is your brother Abel?" He asks God, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And I will remind you of God's answer to him. He didn't. God didn't respond. Because only a murderer could ask such a question. And if the responsibility is not taken by ourselves, by good people holding hands with one another across the state and again across the nation, saying, not now, not ever. I'm better, we're better than this. And if it were to take all of the pleadings and all the beggings in the world to make sure that this is passed, to make our home a safer place for everybody, it would all be worth it. So again, I leave you with these words. Silence is assent. It means you agree. This is not a time for silence. This is a time for standing up and shouting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom, Rabbi. We have with us today as well, if you're ready to speak, Dena Moses from the Charleston Interreligious Council, an organization that represents a number of faith communities in the Charleston area and promotes understanding between all different religions in the Charleston area. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. As the president of the Charleston Interreligious Council, an organization that celebrates religious freedom and whose members belong to over 10 different faith traditions, I call on the legislators of South Carolina to act against hate. With dramatic unanimity, the sacred scriptures of diverse religious traditions vehemently condemn hate. It is neither religious nor an American value. Hate violence is an aggressive expression of prejudice against another person or group of people simply because of who they are or who they are perceived to be. A crime that is motivated by hatred and prejudice tears apart the lives not only of the individuals who are targeted, but of the larger group and community they represent. Hate crimes harm the society by making entire communities feel isolated, vulnerable, and unprotected. Everyone should feel safe in their community, no matter who they are and how they worship here in South Carolina. We, as an organization and as a community of people, are working hard to help build understanding, respect, and thereby removing hate from the hearts and minds of individuals. But we also know hate crimes legislation will help create a society where hate-motivated violence is not tolerated. The leaders I work with at the Charleston Interreligious Council are leading the way with faith values like dignity, respect, freedom. And it's time for the state legislature to join them by moving this bill forward. There's no place for hate violence in our community and our state, and our laws should reflect that. Our faith communities need and should feel secure to practice their faith without fear of discrimination and violence. And I urge our leaders of this state to pass this bill to reflect that unity and that understanding and respect for one another. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dena. Next, we have with us from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, Reverend Wendy Hudson from the Two Rivers Methodist Church. Did I have that right? Two Rivers Church. We appreciate you joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Wendy Hudson. I'm the pastor at Two Rivers Church, which is in Mount Pleasant here in Charleston, South Carolina. My pronouns are she and her. And I come today to speak in favor of passing House Bill 3620 with the addition of the protected class of gender identity. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to sit in on that hearing and to listen to several of my clergy colleagues speak against this House bill, primarily on the unfounded reasons that it would somehow restrict their ability to have freedom of speech. And I was drawn back to my understanding of God that we see all throughout Scripture. Throughout the Bible, the holy text of those of us who follow Jesus and call ourselves Christians, we see that God is always on the side of those who are vulnerable, of those who are on the margins, and those who are dispossessed and who are oppressed. And I believe that we as leaders of God's people, particularly those of us who are pastors and clergy, that we too are always called to stand on the side of those who face discrimination, harm, and violence. Our primary loyalty should always lie with people, especially those who are vulnerable, not with the protection of our own power and our own privilege. This hate crimes bill, with the addition of the protected class of gender identity, is a way for us as residents of South Carolina to say that we are on the side of those who face violence and harm because of who they are. This law would clearly and unambiguously states that we are a people who revere each resident of this state as someone who possesses sacred worth. It would say that we adhere to the law of love and care, and that we believe that law is greater than acts of crime, violence, and oppression. I'm here before you, as many of the others on this call, as a person of deep faith, as one who believes deeply in the words of Scripture, as one who follows Jesus, as one who has committed my life to serving God as an ordained United Methodist pastor. This bill is a good start and can be fully supported by all people of faith, with that addition of the protected class of gender identity. I, like many of my clergy colleagues, stand on the side of life. I, like many of those who spoke yesterday in opposition of this bill, adhere to the sacredness of life. I adhere to the sacredness of the life of all people, especially those who are clearly named as protected groups in this bill. Those whose lives are precious, beautiful, and sacred in God's eyes. All of life, all people are sacred in our eyes. And it is our urgency, our loyalty, especially as people who are faith leaders, to stand up and speak boldly and clearly for the passage of this bill with the addition of that protected class of gender identity, because we are people who say all life is sacred, all life matters. All life is deserving of the protections that are offered in this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, we have with us my rabbi from Kahal Kadosh Beth Elohim here in Charleston, Rabbi Stephanie Alexander. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brandon. I am Rabbi Stephanie Alexander. I have the honor of serving as the senior rabbi of Kahal Kadosh Beth Elohim, as Brandon said, or as we're probably more commonly known, KKBE. My support for this legislation is, as others have said, deeply rooted in my faith tradition and that of my community. A tradition that teaches you shall not hate your kinfolk in your heart, much less act upon such feelings, that we are all created in the image of the divine, and that we are all affirmatively our brothers and our sisters' keepers. Hate crimes are committed because a person or a group of people are singled out and targeted for being different, for being other. passage of a hate crime bill, legislation that recognizes the unique animosity that drives hate crimes, all hate crimes. That kind of a bill says that we see everyone as human, that there is one we, one us that encompasses us all, that there is no such thing as an other. But it also recognizes that there is a significant and crucial difference in our lived experiences. It recognizes that some of us face more danger because of the color of our skin. It recognizes that some of us are more at risk because of our gender identity. It recognizes that some of us live with more fear because of our religion, our sexual orientation, our ethnicity, our beliefs. 47 other states have recognized these very real differences by passing hate crime legislation. And it is simply long since time that South Carolina do the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Reverend David H. Messner from the Unitarian Church in Charleston is here with us today, and wanted to say a few words. Reverend Messner, there you are.
With you. I'm saying this is like the congregation of my dreams, to hear like 20 great sermons. And then it's not my dream to follow 20 great sermons, but I'm here because this is so deeply important to me and my faith community. I serve, as you say, the Unitarian Church in Charleston. And we are, if I would pick a first commitment that draws us together as a community, is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Rabbi Alexander said it, the image of God. Each of us, the image of God. How is that possible? That's the mystery and the faith conviction I bring to this. And so how are we going to take care of each other with that knowledge, with that burden in our hands, that we must answer that question from Genesis. We are indeed the keeper of our families. I want to say just a few words. One, I speak for myself. I serve my church and I know their heart, but today I just want to speak for myself and from my heart. And I want to speak to this idea of a common life of faith. I do not think a life of faith is about doctrine. I do not think it is about denomination. I think it is about a way of being in the world. I think that's what we're called to do. Not necessarily only adhere to some set of rules, although we're gathered together here to talk about making a rule that might make us stronger, but we're trying to live as good people in a family relationship to one another. So how do we live a life of faith? I think we dare to go deeper to understand our relationships and to understand our humanity and its demands. Now, a preacher earlier in our tradition gave a sermon a long time ago, and he said in it, he said, "A tree shall be known by the fruit which it bears." Some of you've heard the sermon. I have that in mind, that image of that tree and its fruit, and to walk out in the yard every morning and to taste of the fruit and to find it bitter. To do that for a week or a month, maybe walk out, taste of that fruit and find it poisonous and it makes you sick. To do that year after year, decade after decade, and not ask what's going on with this tree. So I mean to suggest that as we continue to taste the fruit of the tree of hate, and we taste that fruit, which is violence and it's intimidation and it's tyranny against our most vulnerable, how do we not look to the root of the tree itself and begin to organize around pulling the tree out? So it is insufficient to say violence is wrong or violence is bitter fruit. It is necessary to drive to the root of the tree and to say that it is hate and tyranny against the vulnerable that is what is causing the poisonous fruit. That's what we're trying to do. That's what this law is trying to do. That's why I call upon people of faith to go deeper. And if you're empowered with the gift of having a vote on this matter. I want you to go deeper, but I don't want any of us to miss the chance to go deeper and to say, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because it's more than the fruit. Who among us, if I walk out front and there's a swastika painted on my driveway, do I have a graffiti problem? That would be a bizarre misunderstanding of the problem I am facing. That is tasting fruit stupidly day by day when people are confronted with what is the equivalent of a swastika in the driveway. And we are not stupid people, and we are definitely people of faith. So I call us to go deeper, to see hate is what is the root of the tree that must be pulled out. I encourage us to do it through legislation, to do it through law, to do it through enforcement, to do it through collaboration among people of faith in our faith communities. I am so thrilled to be together with this esteemed group because we can do work beyond the law, but we need the law as the foundation to continue our work together. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for letting me add my little sermonette.
Thank you so much for joining us. We just have one or two more folks. We have with us Holli Emore, the Executive Director of the Cherry, I hope I got your last name right, the Executive Director of the Cherry Hill Seminary. Thanks for making time for us. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the chance to be here as well. I am a religious leader. We were asked to possibly be here, and I'm also an officer of a state interfaith group. But I'm really speaking today as director of a seminary. It's a distance ed program. We have students all over North America and in several other countries. And I'm often asked, why is my organization based in South Carolina? Because I'm not the founder. And what's it like to operate in a state which is so resistant to many things which seem to my students to be simply matters of conscience and compassion? In fact, our seminary has led much of the national discussion in our religion around issues of racism and rising white supremacy, sounding an alarm several years ago when we collaborated with the University of South Carolina to produce a symposium here in Columbia called Paganism and Its Discontents, and we published those papers last year. I also have provided input to FBI leadership on the subject here in Columbia for a good many years, and been a minority faith liaison to the Richland County Sheriff's Department. We heard Sheriff Lott speak yesterday about how important this law will be to his ability to do his work to keep our community safe, because this is the problem. Whatever we might think about each other, there are a lot of us that do not feel safe. Will this law eliminate all danger? No, but it's a next step that we have to take. In my religious tradition, justice is extremely important, and working for social justice is a piece of our practice. I certainly don't need to remind our legislators of the sorrowful history that we have in the state, both past and recent, of racism and anti-Semitism. And despite significant progress, we seem to have somehow omitted this very necessary passage of hate crimes legislation. So I want to add my voice to those of my comrades here. As religious leaders, we have no fear of this stifling our voice. We don't feel that this is going to impinge on our practice in any way whatsoever. In fact, we feel it's a necessary piece of our faith journey. And I do call on all our elected leaders to support this legislation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Holli. I think we have one more speaker, and then we'll open this up if the press that are with us have any questions. It's a great problem to have so many faith leaders that are willing to step up to the plate and call for the passage of this hate crime legislation. If only we could have the problem of too much support with everything that that we try to get done. Pastor Thomas Dixon, are you with us? I know that you were driving earlier.
Yes, I'm actually with you.
And you're still driving, but thank you for joining us.
Please forgive me for being behind the wheel, but sometimes we have to take exception to our personal position in order to make sure that the greater good is spoken up for. And I have no problem speaking on behalf of this hate crime bill in South Carolina. First off, let me start by saying that when it comes to the gender identity language and the protections that need to be added, I fully believe that they need to be added to this bill as it moves forward. But my main focus in my conversation right now is on South Carolina and its failure to act in passing hate crime legislation since 2015 and the tragedy inside of Mother Emanuel. I'm appalled at our South Carolina General Assembly. I do not understand them. I wish I could. I've prayed over this as a pastor, as a man of faith, as a believer, and I just don't understand people like that. And I'm speaking about our South Carolina General Assembly, who the night of June 17, 2015, inside of Mother Emanuel AME Church, lost one of their colleagues because of a hate crime, because of hate, because of racial hatred. He was murdered at the end of a Bible study by a white supremacist inside of a church, him and 8 more Christians who did nothing but show him love. Hate did that. And this was a direct colleague, Senator Clemente Pinckney, of many of our South Carolina state legislators who, as his body lay in state in the Capitol building, these legislators walked past there. They, Senator Pinckney's grieving widow, they gave nice platitudes of grief on the loss of their colleague. They even went and voted to remove the Confederate flag from the State House grounds after much debate. But that symbolic gesture has no power when it comes to exerting the force of the law over hate in South Carolina. And here we are now 6 years later. And Representative Wendell Gilliard has put forth legislation, I believe, almost every one of those 6 years dealing with hate crime. And it's been turned down 6 years later. Those same people who said they cared about their colleague's death and how he died refused to do anything to pass this legislation. And I don't understand that. As a man of faith, as a human being, I don't understand that. And I definitely don't understand it when I look at the state of Georgia, who had an incident in February of last year that wasn't even discovered until May of last year. But 4 months after the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, Georgia passed hate crimes legislation. And Ahmaud Arbery wasn't even a member of their General Assembly. He was just a Black man murdered by hate, just like State Senator Clemente Pinckney was a Black man murdered by hate, along with 8 of his churchgoers. And here we are 6 years later having this same conversation that Georgia had that took them 4 months to act, and we have not done anything. So now, at this point, at this juncture in history, it is my sincere hope and my prayer that the South Carolina General Assembly, both the House and the Senate, will pass hate crimes legislation finally in the great state of South Carolina, because apparently Hatred has had a place in South Carolina that they don't want to move away from. But it's time. It's time. It's 6 years after Mother Emanuel. It's 2021. And it's time for hatred to be stamped out in this state and in this nation. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Pastor Dixon. I know that if Representative Gilliard was here, he would express a similar frustration with having worked so hard over these past 5 years to get hate crime legislation passed and for those efforts to be fruitless. But I do have some optimism that our state legislators are going to act this year and get it done. And there are plenty, I think there are plenty of folks in the state legislature that share the desire to make this happen. And we're seeing that. Cheryl Nail.
Thanks, Brandon. Hi, I'm Cheryl Nail. I am representing the Community Relations Council of the Columbia Jewish Federation, and I'm also a proud member of the steering committee for Stamp Out Hate South Carolina. On behalf of our entire coalition, I want to thank each one of you for coming together today to stand up in support of hate crimes legislation and to make a unified stand to stamp out hate in South Carolina. We want to thank members of the media for being here as well. And at this time, we're happy to take any questions that you may have. Feel free just to either unmute yourself or raise your hand. And you can direct those questions specifically to a speaker or in general. Hearing no questions, I thank you all for coming today. What you've done here is incredibly important work. We will continue to work together to stamp out hate in South Carolina. I encourage all of you to visit our website, stampouthate.sc. If you haven't yet contacted your legislatures, there's a contact tool right there. And thank you again for lending your voice to this very important issue.
Thank you all. And this video will be made available to anybody who requests it, and we'll be putting it up on our social media if you want to take a second look or share it with your communities. Thank you.